It says, I'm an unapologetic optimist who believes in power of humans.
Everybody had a right to live a life of dignity.
Who do you consider your role models?
We have the Gurukul systems in India.
Pretty fascinated by your career trajectory.
Was just wanderlust.
What does that name signifies to you, and what is the connection?
The desire to have a great adventure.
What was that experience like?
Gave you an opportunity.
Introduction to the indigenous way of life.
Education and your work experiences, and make a decent living. Because there are many ways you can acquire knowledge.
To make the planet a fairer, kinder, and better place.
Which is also an amazing way
for us and generations to come.
Educating people.
Your leadership experience.
We now have a new problem, which is you're overqualified for the jobs we have.
I'm your host, Ravi Toor, and today we are diving into the realms of social work, education, women's empowerment, and the immigrant experience, and everything that falls in between with our very special guest, Sobhana Jaya Madhavan. Sobhana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Delighted to be here with you today.
It's an honor to have you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Sobhana's journey is a testament to resilience, transformation, and unapologetic optimism. Graduating with a master's degree in social work from Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, her career has spanned across continents and sectors. After contributing significantly in Southeast Asia, she made an important move to Canada in 1995. Starting with minimum wage jobs, she ascended to senior roles within the government of British Columbia, notably serving as the acting assistant deputy minister. Her work has always focused on fostering strong relationships and partnerships. As associate vice president of external relations at SFU since 2017, Sobhana has been instrumental leveraging her extensive experience to bridge the gap between the academy and the community. Her leadership extends beyond academia as the president of the BC India Business Network and chief impact officer at #Code in India, underpinning her commitment to mentorship and skill development. Recognized globally for her contributions, Sobhana has been honored with the Women of the Decade Award by the Women Economic Forum in 2019 and the International Inclusion Champion Award in 2022, just to list off a few. Super excited to chat with you and to learn from you. But to start us off, in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
That was a very long introduction. I would definitely have a very brief intro for myself. I think I would describe myself as a simple human being who's an optimist and a global citizen, and take great pride in being a mother and a volunteer.
That's very nicely summed up by you. Where I want to start off this conversation is just on that optimism. So I was on your LinkedIn profile. I saw your bio and it stood out to me. This is what it says. It says, I'm an unapologetic optimist who believes in power of humans to make the planet a fairer, kinder, and better place for us and generations to come. Could you please elaborate on that unapologetic optimist and what does that statement mean to you?
So I'm a strong believer that optimism is all about us making a very conscious decision to show up in this world in a certain way. Just like happiness, a lot of people might disagree with me, but I strongly believe that happiness is a choice. Being happy is a choice. Being kind is a choice. Being generous is a choice. So I think each of us, we have a very limited time in this world, and irrespective of our background, our cultural or religious or educational or whatever be the backdrop against which we show up in this world, we have to make a very conscious decision as to who we want to be. And I, as an adult, as a human being, I'm choosing to be an unapologetic optimist, and I'm choosing to put my time, my energy, my talents towards trying to make this world a fairer, better, and kinder place for all.
That's lovely. If we can have more people like you who think along the same line, this world would be definitely a changed place for sure. Who do you consider your role models and inspirations, people that you have looked up to your life, and why?
My children, my two sons, Prabhanj and Niranj, I would say are my role models. I think one of the biggest mistakes, in my humble opinion, one of the biggest mistakes adults make is we do not learn from children. and we let our pride come in the way of learning from children and seeing the world through their eyes.
Very interesting and a very different opinion than what I've heard before. So thank you for sharing that. How I want to go about this session today is track your career path right from your early days and come all the way to your present state today. And a part of that is your extensive experience in social work. Now, I do know that you got your Master's of Social Work from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, your journey and your introduction to social work started even before that at a young age of 16. Could you tell me the name Hema Balakrishnan, and apologize if I am getting it wrong? What does that name signifies to you, and what is the connection with there and your social work?
Oh, thank you so much. And so thoughtful of you to go back and look at that part of my life. So, I was born in Malaysia, and when I was 5 years old, I was sent to boarding school in India, in the state of Tamil Nadu in southern India. And ever grateful to my parents for making education such an important part of my life and sending me off to a boarding school far away so that I could get a decent education. I grew up in southern India, and when I was about 12 years old, moved from the state of Tamil Nadu to the state of Kerala. My ancestry is in Kerala. And I was about 12 when I landed in a small town called Palakkad in the state of Kerala. I lived in a village at that point with my mother and my grandparents. And literally, life was about traveling about 60 kilometers to school in the morning and coming back by the time the sun sets. So that was predominantly what happened. As I became an older teenager, I was very frustrated that there was really nothing much to do other than go to school and come back. So I used to complain a lot about it. And one day, my family inspired me and said, "Why don't you just join the club and do something in a club?" So I looked around and I came across a road track club and didn't know much about Rotary International or Road Track. So, out of curiosity, I looked for more information, got a bit interested in it, and I joined the club. Little did I know that one decision to join a road track club was going to fundamentally change my life's journey and the trajectory of my life. What happened with the road track club was a few months into becoming a member, I was asked to become the president of the road track club. And I agreed and I won the election and became the president. And one of the requirements was that the president has to find a community service project in the community. I had no idea what all this was about because I had never volunteered in my life. Nobody in my family volunteered. And I definitely didn't know what a community service project was. So I talked to a few people, and somebody in the community said, "You should go and speak to Mrs. Hema Balakrishnan because she runs an orphanage for young boys and she does a lot of social service." So that was my introduction to Hema Auntie. And I found her, went and met with her, and then figured out there is this entire world and sector out there called social services. And Hemanti introduced me to the orphanage that she was in charge of in Palakkad. It was young boys under the age of 16, I believe, and they had housing, food, schooling, healthcare. And I started to spend time in the orphanage with members of the Road Track Club. And what I realized was there was a field here that I could get engaged in and I could make a career of. And that eventually led me to applying for the MSW degree, and then the rest is history. And she was an amazing human being, the most generous person I'd met in my early days, a giver, a connector, and someone who believed everybody had a right to live a life of dignity and respect, no matter what their circumstances were. So even though she passed away a few years ago, I continue to thank her for the impact she had on my life.
That's lovely. And I love that story. Dignity and respect, that's the most fundamental human right that every citizen of this globe should have. So thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned from there you went on to pursue your master's in social work. What I found particularly interesting is You also went to the government college in Chittoor, the University of Calicut. You did your Bachelor's of Arts in Philosophy and Psychology, but you were also a university topper there. Could you walk me through with how were those college days and what lessons do you carry from those days still in your life?
Yeah, it's lovely to go back down memory lane. Now I'm 56 years old. I have a different perspective on what happened those years. But honestly, growing up in a very small village and trying to pursue education was not that straightforward because my family, my parents, and my siblings and I, we as a family unit were quite progressive and quite freedom loving. My parents were not strict at all, and I had tremendous freedom growing up, which was not the norm those days in the late 80s and early 90s. So, my family and my life in particular was a bit of an anomaly. So, to give you a simple, small example, I became the president of the Road Track Club when I was 16. And then, when I was about 18 years old, my dad got me a moped. So, I could go to Chittoor College, which was quite far from my village. It was a good 20, 30-kilometer
Oh, wow.
ride. And so, if I had to take a bus and go to college, it would literally take me an hour and a half or more, depending on how busy the bus was and depending on weather and was it raining and people were having trouble getting around. So my father got me a moped and I love bikes. So he got me a small moped. So I used to cut across through the paddy fields and reach the college in about 40 minutes or so. But it was very unusual to see a young girl zipping in a motorbike to college those days. I was a bit of an anomaly in many ways, but thanks to my family, I was able to do those things. So the reason I joined Chittoor College for the philosophy degree was when I was volunteering with Hema Aunty and the orphanage, I became very interested in psychology,
Hmm.
specifically child psychology, because I saw the impact of abandonment and attachment issues in these young orphan children because they had been given up by their biological parents. They did not have a sense of family. They were growing up with a group of children that they were not related to. These children suffered psychologically from those experiences. And so I got quite fascinated and concerned about mental health, especially child and youth mental health. So
Hmm.
those days you didn't have internet, you didn't have cell phones and laptops to go and research things. So it was a little bit of this and that put together. I thought getting a degree in psychology might help me become a psychologist, and maybe that's what I wanted to do with my life. There was no college degree available close by that was in psychology. But at Chittoor College, which was a government college under the University of Calicut, they had a BA philosophy degree. And if you did BA philosophy, you got to take two courses in psychology, general psychology and abnormal psychology. So that was why I entered that stream. But even though it was by accident, I loved philosophy. It was life changing for me because it exposed me to European philosophy, Indian philosophy, ethics, religion, all things that eventually helped me think more globally, think broader than what was my little cultural stream that I
Hmm.
was swimming through in life at that point in my life. And then, thanks to that degree, I was able to then explore social work, apply to the MSW degree, and then eventually become a social worker. So, my life is a series of, I would say, happy accidents, a lot of serendipity and coincidence, and just navigated through all these very interesting points and decision points that eventually got me to where I am today. But now, when I look back, I'm really happy things happened the way they did.
Yeah, I'm really happy that they happened the way they did. And that's part of the reason why we are here. And I love that you said it's interesting because your story is really interesting. Even when all the research I was doing, I was pretty fascinated by your career trajectory. So, in line with that, after doing your master's in social work, you started working with some NGOs in India. And then you went back to Malaysia and you spent some time there working for, correct me if I'm wrong, a consumers association. What was that experience like? And why did you make the move back to Malaysia at the time?
Growing up in India, though my roots are very Indian, I had a Malaysian passport. And in India, I
Mhm.
was considered a foreigner. So, for example, I had to register with the local police station and let them know, hey, a foreigner is living in your
Yeah.
in your neighborhood. And every couple of years, I would go back to Malaysia to renew my passport and
Mm.
spend some time there. When I finished my bachelor's, I've always been very curious about the world in general, and I love traveling and really wanted to see the world. So when I was in my final year of BA, I decided to do my master's. So I moved to Mumbai, which was like moving to another planet for me. From a small village with a small population of probably 1,000 people or so, all from a very similar cultural background, to then go into this city and to work in the slums of Mumbai was just mind blowing for me.
Mhm.
And so the 2 years in Mumbai was definitely a game changer and a life changing experience for me. And then when I finished my master's, I started to work in Mumbai for a bit with a nonprofit. But I soon realized I grew up in India. I was there from the age of 5 to about 23, and I really wanted to go see the world. So the easiest way and the straightforward way of doing that was to move back to Malaysia. So I declared to my parents, I'm going to go to Malaysia and I'm going to travel and work in Malaysia. And they were quite happy to hear that, supported me. And so I went back to Malaysia and started to apply for jobs. But I soon found out, very similar to the challenge that immigrants and newcomers and refugees in Canada have in terms of foreign credentials. My credentials were not accepted in Malaysia even
Okay.
though I was a Malaysian citizen and I went back. They did not recognize my MSW. And the fact that I did not speak Malay language fluently was also a challenge. My options were quite limited. I started to apply for a lot of jobs, and eventually, the Consumers Association of Penang, which was a very well established consumer nonprofit organization, hired me as a research and publications officer. So my job was to help them with their publications. They had a regular newspaper called Utusan Consumer, which was very well known. And they took a very strong stance against issues. They were very pro consumer. Years ago, they were talking about the benefits of farming without pesticides, the benefits of Eastern ways of healthcare that did not have, say, side effects for many of the
Mhm.
Medicaid, the benefits of Eastern ways of knowledge creation, working with indigenous peoples. They were very progressive. And so it was really interesting to work with them. And halfway through, they realized that I could do a lot more for them. So they made me the coordinator of the Third World Network, which was a network of policymakers and researchers and academics and writers. So everybody from Greenpeace to Vandana Shiva to the UN representatives were part of that network. And
Well,
it just opened the horizons for me. And I was so inspired by all the work. But what that experience in Malaysia did for me is the power of collaboration and cooperation, the good things that can happen when people come together locally and globally for a cause or to create awareness about something or to collaborate for research or to write a book together. I had never been exposed to that space in such a big way. And so when I look back now, I would say that 4 or 5 years in Malaysia, working with the global community, traveling in Southeast Asia, and then moving to Canada eventually helped me to get into a role like the one at SFU, which is very public facing and all about community engagement and bringing people together and being a bit of a matchmaker. Yeah, it was a great experience and I'm very thankful for it.
that's lovely. So my question next is from there, how did the decision to come to Canada came about? It's on the other side of the planet. What sparked your interest?
Yeah, so I think I have always suffered from wanderlust. I think, and I'm glad it's incurable. So after living in Malaysia for a few years and being exposed to international players and reading about all kinds of things happening around the world, I was just so wanting to travel and get to the other side of the world, literally. And so I considered immigration, and I was looking at Australia and Canada. And
Mhm.
at that time, my brother was already here in Canada. So I knew a little bit more. And he encouraged me to apply for permanent residency. And he said there were a lot of opportunities for social workers. So I was considering Australia, Canada. I opened the map. Those days, maps were in books, right? So I
Yeah.
opened the map and I looked at where Canada was and where Australia was. And Australia was very close to Malaysia and India. So I turned that decision away and I applied to Canada because it was halfway across the globe. So the true and honest reason why I chose Canada was just wanderlust and the desire to have a great adventure.
That's lovely. And I'm sure it's been an adventure so far for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
So 1995, you come into Canada. You already mentioned something along the lines of foreign credentials not being recognized in Malaysia. I don't assume it was any different in Canada. So can you give me a walk down of how were those initial days and how was the professional landscape here?
Yes. So when I landed in June of 1995, I was clueless how difficult it's going to be to get a job because all I knew was there was a demand for social workers because my brother told me that. I did not know how tough it'll be to navigate the labor market and to end up with a job that actually gave you an opportunity to use your education and your work experiences and make a decent living. So I reached in June and I started to immediately apply for jobs, predominantly in the social services sector. So
Mhm.
I was applying for jobs like in community engagement, counseling, working with seniors, anything in that space. I did not get a single response and
Wow.
I did not get a single job interview. I did not even get a rejection letter. Had I got a rejection letter, I'm telling you truthfully, I would have framed it because at least then I know someone read my application or they saw me, heard me, they just don't want me. So after about 2, 3 weeks, I started to get very concerned because I wasn't expecting this. I went to a settlement agency in Coquitlam, close to where I was living, and I told them what was happening, and they told me that's just generally how things happen in the early days. Just take it in your stride. And they encouraged me to volunteer, which I was more than happy to do. So they signed me up for volunteering with the seniors' home in Coquitlam. So I started to volunteer literally within a month of coming to Canada. And I'm so glad I did it because I really felt I was going to work and I was using my social work skills. So that was wonderful. Didn't have luck with jobs at all. And when 1 month passed and I still wasn't getting any job interviews, I started to worry because my finances were going dry. So then I decided, after talking to a few people, a lot of people said, you will not get a job in your area of specialization. Be grateful if you get a minimum wage job. And a few people encouraged me to take out my MSW and BA and just apply for jobs with grade 12.
Hmm.
So, out of desperation, honestly, I did that. And I got my first interview with GM Place, Rogers Arena. So the new building had just been completed and they were hiring a lot of people, janitors, security guards, and ushers. So the advertisement said they were hiring for those. So I applied and I got invited for an interview and went and stood in line with hundreds of other people in Vancouver. And when my turn came and I started to talk, they asked me, the two panelists asked me if my resume was complete, and I was not sure what they meant. And one of the panelists said, I feel you're not telling me the full story here. So I fessed up and said, yes, I do have a master's degree, but I didn't want to put it in there because nobody was inviting me for an interview, and few other immigrants told me it's best to apply with grade 12. So they say, oh, we now have a new problem, which is you're overqualified for the jobs we have. And I basically said, I'm sorry, but you've got to hire me for something. And I'm happy to be a janitor or a security guard. I have a brown belt in karate, and or I can be an usher. I'm good with people. But I said, I desperately need a job. I'm running out of savings. And I think they found it hard to say no to me. And they hired me as an usher, $7.50 an hour, and a couple of shifts a week for the Canucks and Canucks ice hockey games and Grizzlies basketball games. So that was my first real job in Canada, and very grateful I got the job. Was I mentally prepared to do a minimum wage job? No. Did I feel great about it? No. But it was an important experience to have and a very humbling experience to have. And I'm so glad it happened because fast forward 3 decades, I do a lot of work with newcomers, immigrants, and refugees. And I think, even though I'm an empathetic person by nature, I think having done a minimum wage job, having struggled to find my first job, I think gives me that lived experience that is really important to understand how difficult people's experiences are. So I did that job. A month later, I got invited for a second interview with Coast Foundation, which is an organization in Vancouver that does amazing work for adults with severe mental illness. So I got hired to be an employment counselor to work with adults with severe mental illness, including schizophrenia. And I did both jobs. I would work at Coast Foundation in the morning and then in the evening get changed, wear my uniform, and run over to Rogers Arena and then work and do the night shift, finish by midnight, and then come home. And I did both those jobs. And then in December of 1995, I got my first real break with the Ministry for Children and Family with BC government as a child protection social worker. But that too wasn't an easy experience, but I am so glad things worked out and I entered government.
That's lovely. And thank you for sharing that story with us, because I think it's very important to share those immigrant experiences, because a lot of us go through that. I came to Canada as an international student myself, and I've been through the rigors of having to work a minimum wage job because that's what I have to do to support myself. I guess my question to you on that is, what was your biggest takeaway from that experience that you would like to pass on to the fellow immigrants who are in Canada or coming to Canada?
I think the biggest takeaway for me was to understand what does it really mean to immigrate to a foreign country. In my case, I willingly applied for permanent residency and then I came here. The disconnect was I did not realize just because I qualified for immigration and I scored X number of points because I had a master's degree and I could speak English, it does not automatically translate into I will find a job as a social worker in Canada. I did not know that. And I think that's very important for new immigrants and newcomers to know that there is a disconnect between the immigration system and the labor and employment system. And accepting that and not being bitter about it and telling myself, this job is going to help you understand what it means to work in Canada, to understand the ins and outs of working in a foreign country, and then setting up the stage to move on to something that is bigger and better and more suited to my background. So I think just accepting it as a reality in that immigrant journey and then not taking it personally, not being bitter about it, not being negative about it, but thinking about it as a valuable experience to enter a new country and move along to where you want to get to eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very important message for all of us immigrants and the newcomers coming into the country. So from there, as you mentioned, you went on to the Ministry of Child and Welfare Development. You spent a considerable amount of time in the ministry working through various roles. You were a director, ED, and then went on to be assistant deputy minister. Can you walk me through that time that you spent in the government and how has that shaped your leadership experience?
So, the 20 years in BC public service and with the Ministry for Children and Family Development was absolutely memorable and very valuable to me, both personally and professionally. But the story of my 20 years with government starts with a failed interview. So I was shortlisted after a written exam. I passed the written exam, and then I was shortlisted for an interview. And the interview had three panelists, and they were interviewing for 300 child protection social workers to join the BC government because an unfortunate tragedy had happened a while ago where a young child died because of severe neglect. And there was a huge investigation, and the government was asked to hire more trained social workers. 300 social workers is a lot of social workers to find in a country like Canada. So they had put out a call for hiring across the country. And so I applied, wrote the written exam, and then was interviewed. Now, what happened at that interview, it was just a few weeks after I had come to the country. So I did not understand the questions at all. The questions were framed more for somebody who had grown up in Canada and who went to university in Canada. So I had a vague idea what they were trying to ask me, but the specific words or terminology that they used, I had no clue what they were talking about. So what ended up happening is the first five questions they asked me, I tried to make sense of it, and then I would pull out answers, examples from Mumbai, from Kerala, from Malaysia, and my volunteer work in BC, and try to answer the question to the best of my ability. But they did not get what they wanted. Fortunately for me, this last question was a role play, and they wanted me to pretend and role play that I was a social worker and that I was knocking on the door of a woman who was dealing with the Ministry for Children and Families. There was a complaint, and there was accusations that she was neglecting and abusing her child, and she had addictions issues. There was other issues that she was dealing with. Now, later on, I got a call after the interview, and I was told I got a job as a child protection social worker and I could join the team in Surrey in British Columbia. I was thrilled. I think it was about $45,000 a year with benefits. So it was great news. Very happily, I go for my first day at the ministry, and the chair of the panel was my supervisor. And so she welcomed me, and we got talking. End of the day, she called me in and said, I'm going to share something with you, not to make you feel bad, but to make sure you work hard to be successful in this role. And she said, you actually failed the interview because your first five questions, the answers were not right. But for the role play, you did the best amongst any of the applicants that we interviewed. So based on the role play, we decided to give you the job and put you on probation and see how you do. So I was very grateful and quite surprised, but very happy. And she mentored me, she coached me, I got good training. And long story short, a couple of years later, when she retired, I applied and I got her job.
Well,
So for me, the big takeaway, and this is especially for decision makers, employers, companies, government, is that the newcomers who get interviewed may not give you exactly what you want to hear. They may not have the lingo or they may not have language fluency, whatever be the case. But they come with lot of skills, lot of knowledge, a lot of past experiences, which can all be transferred nicely into the Canadian context. But they need to be given an opportunity to move from one context to another. And with a little bit of mentoring, training, and those opportunities, we can all become great contributors to Canada.
100%, and how you have made the most of that opportunity. Kudos to you for that. Just in terms of, because you've spent so much time in the social work field in Canada, across the globe, how the social work setup is today within Canada, what changes would you like to make, if any, based on how things are done and why?
Yeah. So before answering that question, in your previous question, you had asked me a little bit about the journey in public
True.
service. And I just want to touch on that because it started off as a frontline social worker, which is the most junior role in the Department of Social Work. So you start as a social worker, a child protection social worker, and they're actually called social program officers. So you have this grading system, it's called SPO. And so you start at one level and then you move your way up. In my case, thanks to a very welcoming environment and amazing supervisors that I had, I quickly moved into a team leader role. And then from there, I was encouraged to apply for management jobs. But when I was a team leader in Langley, I was asked to support the indigenous community, the Stolo Nation, to help them create their first child welfare team. When I got involved with the indigenous community, and some of my clients were also indigenous, I was frankly horrified by what the impacts of colonization and residential schools was in Canada. I had not read about it prior coming to Canada. And even when I came to Canada, I didn't know much about it. And that is one of the big gaps we have when newcomers come into Canada and become immigrants or whatever, but they don't realize we're coming into a context where the First Nation communities and Indigenous peoples have had generations of trauma and very negative experiences because of residential schools and colonization and the more Eurocentric ways of thinking. So I was really horrified and I was pretty shaken up. And I started to really have ethical dilemmas about continuing in child welfare because I felt I was part of the problem. So I confided and spoke to my indigenous colleagues in the Stolo Nation, and I said, I really feel I'm part of the problem, and maybe I should leave and go and do something differently. And a couple of them, especially the team leader in the Stolo Nation, encouraged me to work in a indigenous community and support indigenous peoples in dealing with their issues and in overcoming them and in having the ability to take care of their own peoples. So I was very inspired by that and I started to look for opportunities and by accident came across a job posting in Haida Gwaii in northern BC, close to Prince Rupert.
Yeah.
I had never heard of Haida Gwaii. I didn't even know this place existed. I looked on the map, it was a dot in the Pacific Ocean. So I reached out to my community services manager and I said, I want to move to Haida Gwaii. And there's a team leader posting there. And she supported me. And so I moved to Haida Gwaii and as a team leader there, worked very closely with the Haida people and worked very closely to help them set up their first child welfare delegated agency. Those 2 years in Haida Gwaii was transforming for me. Not only did I learn a lot about the realities here in Canada, I was really influenced by the indigenous ways of knowing and living. And to this day, it continues to influence me. Very grateful for that. And then after 2 years in Haida Gwaii, I decided to move to Victoria. At that time, I was married and my children were very young. They were like 2 and 5. And so I really needed to make some decisions about their schooling. So I moved to Victoria to headquarters as a policy analyst and moved my kids to schools in Victoria. Again, was very lucky. I had very senior management folks in government who decided to take me under their wings, deputy ministers, associate deputy ministers, executive directors. And over a period of about 10 years, I became the first executive director for the Provincial Office of Domestic Violence. And during that time, had many opportunities to be acting deputy minister and support senior executive. And I was one of the few people who was asked to and given permission to do external engagement and represent the government locally, provincially, nationally, and even internationally.
Wow.
So I was very fortunate. I had amazing mentors, bosses, and I had the most amazing experiences. I can't say enough about it. And I was being trained and coached to become an acting deputy minister and move up one more level when unfortunately I lost my father in India quite suddenly.
I'm sorry.
And mom, yeah, thank you. My mom was struggling. And so I made the tough decision to leave government and move to India with my 2 sons.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And I love that piece of the introduction to the indigenous way of life, because I can relate to that. Coming into this country as a student, it was never part of the curriculum. It was never taught to us, never introduced to us. So you learn about these things many a years into while you're living in the country. I think it would be great if this could be introduced right from the gate for those immigrants coming in so that they know the context of this land.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the field of social work, how it has changed and what needs to change, the roots of social work, because I teach a course, I developed a micro credential course at SFU. So I teach a course like Social Work 101. And I talk about it in that course to my students. Is if you go back more than a century ago, if you go back into the roots of social work, it begins with charity and the church,
Mhm.
right? So those are the roots and the beginnings of social work. It was more like, oh, let's help somebody. Let's give somebody something. Somebody doesn't have clothes. Let's give them clothes. Someone doesn't have food. Oh, let's give them food. But over time, like all professions, be it teaching, be it healthcare, social work has also changed. It has gone from charity to basically helping people help themselves and empowering people to take charge of their life and make change happen. So, one of the things that we need to continue to do, we've done a lot of amazing things in all the professions, but one of the things that we still need to do more of is making professions be better informed by the EDI lens, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We need to learn to see problems and challenges and issues from a more global perspective and be open and humble to different ways of knowing. So, if we're talking about, say, parenting, there are many ways to parent. If we are talking about educating, there's many ways to educate, right? We have the Gurukul systems in India. That
Mhm.
was an amazing way of educating people. We have universities, which is also an amazing way of educating people. But if you look at indigenous elders, many of them did not go to university, may not even have completed high school. But we call them elders. We call them to come and teach us and guide us to do things better. Why? Because there are many ways you can acquire knowledge, right? So I think, especially in the Western world, we've got to have a deeper respect and humility to learn from other cultures and other systems, be it in healthcare, education, anything else.
Mhm.
There's so much we can learn from the world.
Yeah, I love that outlook because you're never perfect. Nobody is perfect. And even if you are in that moment, it is going to change in the next moment. And how do you adapt to that and how do you keep up with that? So you spent all that time in BC government. From there, you went to India. I know you worked for, I believe, New Gen Knowledge Works there for a couple of years. But then you came back and you joined Simon Fraser University. Can you give us a lowdown of what this role is? What are some of your responsibilities within the role?
When I moved to India, I was the global head of and AVP of organizational excellence for this international public academic publishing firm called Nugent Knowledge Works. And it gave me an opportunity to travel to different parts of the world, meet teams from different parts of the world. And after 2 years of doing that, I moved back to BC. And my role at SFU, if I were to describe it in very simple terms, it's really being a connector and a bridge builder. The role of external relations is to primarily connect the academy to the community and all things in between, right? So we make sure that the university is open and accessible to different communities, to businesses, to different levels of government, and that we are able to bring those players into the academy. An example would be, we know that there is the issue of, say, access to education,
Mhm.
right? Now, one party cannot address this issue. You need community agencies, you need governments, you need universities and colleges, you need students, you need businesses, you need everybody to come together so that we could actually make that problem go away or address that problem better. Same thing with housing,
Mhm.
same thing with international students, same thing with food security. So, external relations, we make sure we open doors and we connect people, we connect ideas, we connect different players, and we make sure that we strategically create opportunities, we strategically nurture relationships that is good for all parties involved.
So, with the rapidly changing technology, there's a statement that I've recently come across quite often. And the statement goes along the lines that universities are no longer relevant given how exponentially things are changing, technology is changing. You work with a university, you are in the education system. Is that a true statement? What is your understanding of it? Why or why not?
So, my personal views is that universities and educational institutions will always be relevant, right? It's same as healthcare systems and hospitals will always be relevant, right? So these are systems, right? And they have a purpose. So the core of any educational institution, whether it's an elementary school, a kindergarten, or a university, is to basically educate individuals and to give individuals access to education, right? So it's basically teaching and learning. And teaching and learning, in my opinion, will always be relevant because we're all lifelong learners. What is going to change is how we teach and how we learn. So I'll give you a simple example. This social work 101 course that I developed, which I delivered last year, I did not talk about disruptive technology and artificial intelligence. But in the course I'm going to teach starting in the month of May, the same micro credential course, I have now changed the curriculum and the content a little bit. And I'm going to have a session dedicated to the social impacts and consequences of technology and disruptive technology on human society. Because we are going to see a lot of changes. People are going to have to upskill. People are going to have to change the way they work. People are going to accept that employment and unemployment is going to look very different moving forward. There are serious social consequences, and we need to talk about it if we want to be effective social workers. Is my university going to be irrelevant? No. Is my course going to be irrelevant? No, provided I keep changing and adapting the curriculum and the kind of guest I bring to my class to talk to my students.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the caveat there is how are you adapting to this changing world around us? And those who will adapt will stay relevant and those who won't would not stay relevant anymore.
Absolutely. It's no different from there was a time when I was in high school, I was sent to learn typewriting because
Yeah,
those days, if you could do typewriting and shorthand, you could have a better chance at getting a job.
true.
Now, if you ask, a lot of people might ask, what is a typewriter? So this is just over 30 years. I've gone from a typewriter to a laptop and a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
And my mother, who's 84 years old, has a cell phone and keeps in touch with family using her WhatsApp.
Yeah.
She knows what it is, right? So the world keeps changing and we need to keep adapting. And I think universities are no different, right? And I think what we will see is a closer connect between academy and industry, academy and community. And together, I think we will keep shifting and changing and growing and making sure that what we produce and what we provide will be relevant to society. For example, at SFU, a couple of our priorities are reconciliation, making a difference for BC, which means we have to keep in mind there are certain things that's very important for BC. And we are a BC publicly funded institution, so we have to make sure that the research we do or what we do within the university walls is relevant for our province. We might do other things too, but we need to make sure that our priorities are aligned to some extent with the province's priorities too. But then at the same time, we contribute to what is important to Canada, right? For example, SFU is well known for quantum computing, right? Which nationally it is an area that government is looking at and private sector is looking at. At the same time, recently when we had the pandemic and COVID, many of SFU's researchers were directly involved in supporting and working with the provincial government to make sure we could get a handle on the pandemic and we could support government in addressing the serious issues that they needed to quickly figure out what to do. So I think anything in society will remain relevant, including universities, as long as we are nimble, we adapt, we're inclusive, and we change with the times.
Exciting times ahead, to say the least. Shobna, what would you categorize in your illustrious career has been the most proud moment for you, and what did you learn from it?
I think the highlight of 30 plus years of being I think, a working woman, the highlight has been almost always being in a role where giving and connecting was central to it. Giving, and by giving, I mean that there's always this emphasis on making things better by giving something to the other, right? Whether it's making a space in the university available for an event, whether it was finding the right academic to talk to somebody who's trying to solve a problem and needs help, whether it's engaging with people in the community and opening doors to the university so they could feel that they can be also part of the academic institution. That act of giving and paying attention to reciprocity and being in roles where you can shape your role to constantly connect people, ideas, I think that's been the highlight. Yeah.
So the entire 30 years has been a highlight for you, sounds.
Entire 30 years. And even though I became a management professional and I got into senior administration, I think my social work roots have been very alive. At the end of the day, I am part of the community.
True.
I live in the community. I'm a mother. I'm a volunteer. So your job and your job title is just one small aspect of life, right? It's not everything. And I think it's me, I think just reminding myself that I'm a mother, I'm a volunteer, I'm part and parcel of this community here, and also part of the university. I sit on many boards. So just being grateful and being conscious of how important it is to be humble, to be strategic, and always ask yourself, what can I do? What can I give? Rather than what can someone do for me or someone give for me or my institution.
That's my takeaway from this conversation, and I'm gonna abide by that. If looking back at your career, you could give a 20-year-old Shobna an advice based on your life experiences so far, what would your advice be and why?
I think my advice would be to choose to be an optimist. By being an optimist, you're not running away from problems. You're not pretending you don't understand how harsh some of the realities in life are. Like right now, the geopolitical situations, the climate crisis, there's no shortage of problems and concerns. And some things are more scary than others. But by being an optimist, you're not running away from understanding these issues or not accepting that these issues are very much there in the forefront and it'll affect your future. By being an optimist, you're simply choosing to show up in the world in a positive way. You are choosing to speak in a certain way. You're choosing to make the person in front of you feel more welcome and feel that they too belong. It's just more about how you show up in this world and how you constantly remind yourself, despite all these problems, despite life's ups and downs, that there is still so much to be grateful for and still so much that we could do with the little that we have. So I would say to my 20-year-old, choose to be an optimist and choose to be a giver and a connector. Though I was a little bit of that, I think it was over the years I really made it a more of a conscious choice.
That's lovely. I'm sure all of us can take that lesson to heart and make a difference in our lives with that. What I want to talk next about is your volunteer work. And it stands out to me because you're big on volunteer work. Some of your interviews that I've listened to, you say that you spend almost about 15 to 20 hours a week on top of everything that you do just for the volunteer work. And it's been going on for decades now. I have been a culprit. When I first moved to Canada, I didn't understood volunteer work. And I'm like, I'm not going to work for free for anybody. And it took me like a decade to learn it the hard way, the importance of volunteer work. How would you define volunteer work? Why is it important and why others need to take it seriously?
So my longest love affair has been with volunteering. So for me, volunteering is like breathing. I think the day I stop to volunteer, I probably would just die. I mean it actually quite seriously. It's like oxygen. For me, I think volunteering is about giving back to the world, giving back to society, giving back to family. And what a lot of people don't realize is giving back to oneself. And I think it is work that has deep purpose, meaning, and the ability to make you feel so good because it really touches your soul when you volunteer because you are doing something without expecting remuneration. You
Mhm.
are saying, no, I do not want to be paid and I'm not expecting to be paid. So it is a very important thing for people to do because apart from feeling great, you learn valuable skills. For example, one of my volunteer roles for many years now has been as Chief Impact Officer at Hashtag Code.
Mhm.
Now, I've been involved with them for many years in Chennai, in India. I met this young man, Manu Shekhar, who went back to India from Toronto, was really upset and wanted to do something to make technology inclusive for neurodiverse people. Hashtag Code is about teaching coding to youth with autism.
Wow.
And I got pulled into it because of my background. I've worked with people with autism and I really want to be involved in that space. But my job with Manu was not so much about helping families and youth with the autism side of things. It was more about business development and being strategic about scaling up what Hashtag Code was doing. In my day job, operations was a small part of it years ago. So I really also wanted to learn more and grow in that space. Yes, I did not get paid. I don't get paid for being Chief Impact Officer at Hashtag Code. But the learnings I've had over the years, especially in business development, operations, project management, financial management, has been extensive. So I have gained tremendous experience, which then helps me in all the other things I do, including my paid job. So for me, it's a great way to acquire knowledge and experience and to excel in the different areas that we are involved in. Last but not the least, what I want to say about volunteering is that human society is a connected society, right? We are social creatures. That's why we are not individual, solo people living on islands by ourselves,
Yeah.
right? We are in society, we are part of an ecosystem. All our lives are interdependent and interconnected because we are a web, actually, if you think about it. Like a web, when strands get cut or strands are not strong, it affects the entire system. And volunteering gives us an opportunity to strengthen our social fabric. It gives us an opportunity to strengthen our safety nets. And it gives us an opportunity to try and coexist and live peacefully so that all of us as a society can have better outcomes.
Mhm. I couldn't have said it better, and I cannot emphasize enough on the importance of volunteering, and especially for young immigrants who are starting out their career, it can help them immensely. And not everything should be for money, so some things should be right from the goodness of your heart.
Absolutely. And it's a beautiful way in a foreign country to make friends from different cultures. One of the things I fondly remember is my manager at the senior center where I volunteered when I first came in 95. My manager, Darlene, invited me along with her husband for my first Canadian meal.
Wow.
My first Canadian dinner in a home was in Darlene's home. And to this day, I remember it and I'm so grateful for it. And, so you make friendships, you learn about different cultures, different ways of living, different ways of understanding the world. And it just makes us better people. And we just expand our horizons in terms of thinking about life, understanding various things from politics to religion to food. I just think, oh, I just wish everybody would volunteer all the time.
We'll let that be the tagline of the show today. So let's talk about your daily beliefs. So you are a super, super busy person. You have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of volunteer work. You're involved in so many initiatives. What I want to know is, what does your day look like and how do you manage your day effectively?
So my days are long. I like to be very busy. I'm a busybody. I generally my day goes from, I would say, from about 7:30 in the morning till midnight. The university changes day by day because some days are more in the community, meeting people, attending events. Other days might be like today's a day that's more in my office in Burnaby. But I prefer to be a lot in the community, have meetings in the community. I like to go to people rather than have them come to me to my office. And it's a series of meetings, events, spending time to look things up, write things up, give advice, collaborate with people on different things. It's a bit of everything, which is really wonderful. There is a lot of work involved with boards. I sit on a number of boards on behalf of the university. So I sit on the Burnaby Board of Trade. I sit on the United Way of British Columbia Cabinet. I sit on the board of BC India Business Network, and I'm also the current president of BCIBN. I also sit on the boards of the Inclusion Project and Global Emerging Leadership Project. So those are like the five large groups I'm very part of. And I engage a lot with community organizations. So, for example, this week, for the first time, somebody from the Canadian Cancer Society reached out to me and they want to explore a partnership and some collaboration. So, I'm spending time doing that with them. So, there's many things that happen that way. And then usually in the evening, end of day, I like to get some exercise, like to go for long walks, go to the sauna, go to the pool, and just make sure there's physical activity and exercise involved there. I love mindfulness and I love to be quiet at the beginning of the day and end of the day. So I bookend my day with a little bit of yoga and meditation and then take some time to call family. My two sons live in Mexico and my mom lives in India. So I like to just keep in touch with them. And I mentor a lot of people. And so I try to make time during the week to speak to my mentees and both here and in India. I also have two large projects in India that I've been supporting for many years. One is Hashtag Code in Chennai, and the other one is National Federation of Blind Maharashtra. And my dear friend and classmate from Tata Institute, Sakina Bedi, runs a school for blind girls in Pune. And I've been very engaged with both these groups with business development, in creating annual conferences and summits, and helping them connect with other organizations, government, foundations to keep doors open for different revenue generation opportunities. So basically, I try to support, try to engage with individuals, groups, and organizations that think that I might add value. And I'm always looking to see how I can bring those individuals into the university ecosystem. It could be a future student who wants to come to SFU, so connect them to advisors. It might be a company that wants to hire a co-op students. It could be a newcomer that's starting a business in BC, but they are importing something from India. So I connect them to leadership at BCIBN. So, in one word, I think I like to be busy as a matchmaker between ideas, cultures, continents. Yeah, and
Yeah.
just learn and enjoy the experience.
Sounds like we can have one full episode just trying to break that down as to how you do what you do. I really love the mindfulness because I think it's very important in today's day and age. Just quickly, you mentioned you meditate and do yoga. How long in the morning or before going to bed? Like what's 15 minutes, 20 minutes? And is it guided? Is it just solo meditation? Do you sit? What does that look like?
Yeah, so my yoga sessions in the morning and end of night are very brief. I usually try to keep it to 15 minutes because that's realistically what I can do. And I'm actually not a morning person, so I do about 15 minutes and about 5, 10 minutes of meditation. The yoga is guided. I usually follow somebody that's doing a session online or it's recorded and I just follow through with it. And with meditation, I just play some meditative music and I just sit with myself. Some days it's 5 minutes, some days it's 15 minutes. It really depends what's going on for me that morning or night. But I just try to have a little bit of a rhythm to the day because once the working day starts, it's very busy and things are very fluid. Like I might think, oh, now, okay, 2:30, I have a meeting and I'm going to go to a meeting. But in the next 10 minutes, maybe something will come up that is somewhat urgent. The day is fluid. So I find by bookending the day and having a bit of a rhythm to the day, it just gives me a sense of calmness. I'm generally a very calm person and very easygoing. I don't get flustered about things and I don't overthink stuff. My job is to solve problems creatively, collaboratively, and that's my job. And I know, so I just make sure that's what I do. And yes, just learning a little bit more about mindfulness. And I try to keep it quite unscripted and non prescriptive. I like things to be organic, so I go with the flow of things quite easily. Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. I try to meditate in the morning, not before going to bed. So that's why I asked him, like, how long do you do it? Shobna, is there a book that you would recommend for myself or the listeners to go read and why? A book that you would recommend to all of us?
Oh, that's a tough one because there's lots, right? I can definitely say which book impacted me the most.
For sure.
And the book that actually impacted me the most is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And I don't know if you've come across it. So, Zen and the Book of Motorcycle Maintenance is something that I accidentally came across when I was a teenager. A senior student in the university was reading about it. And he told me, oh, you should read about this book. It's just amazing. So I said, okay, fine. I read it and I did not understand much about it. And it was very difficult for me to even understand some of the concepts. And it's written by an author called Robert Pirsig,
Okay.
Pirsig. And the book is actually called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an Inquiry into Values. And the first time I read it, made no sense at all. I got bits and pieces about it. I knew it was something about life and values and a motorcycle. And the motorcycle constantly needed to be repaired and to be maintained. But there was something about that book that drew me to it. And I understood the analogy between motorcycles, taking a trip, and maintaining the motorcycle at an optimum level so that you actually have a good vehicle and you can have a good ride and good experiences. And then overlay it over life. Couple of years ago, as an adult, I read that book again and it just blew me away. It was actually a book that was to teach you how to live your life rooted in values. And how, just like how, if you don't maintain your motorcycle really well, it will break down. Your life, if it is not maintained and not values driven, it will break down. So I would highly recommend that book to folks. It's a bit of a heavy read, I would say. And if you don't have a philosophical bent of mind, you probably will have to go back to things a few times. But I would strongly encourage people to take a look at it.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's the book that I'm ordering right after this meeting of ours. Shobna, if you could put a message on a billboard for the entire world to see, what would your message be and why?
When in doubt, be kind.
That's lovely. Have been breaking barriers for the last so many decades. You're a woman of South Asian origin in a foreign land. What is your message to other women who are finding it difficult to break those barriers or who are at a standstill? What can they do to step up their game?
I would say, first and foremost, self love is important to, I think, experiencing happiness and success in life. I think it's really important for us to love ourselves and to take good care of ourselves. Because if I'm not well, I'm not happy, it's very difficult for me then to take care of others and to make others happy. So I think it's very important to pay attention to self care and mental health. And I think it's a big concern these days, especially mental health. So I would say to everybody that it's really important to pay attention to how we are feeling, how we are doing, and to really be proud and love ourselves to begin with, right? Second thing, in terms of barriers, I personally, maybe because I'm an optimist and I'm by nature a very hopeful person and I don't let things pull me down too much, I think what we see as a barrier, if we are able to apply a different perspective or approach, that barrier soon becomes an opportunity, right?
Hmm.
Uh, a barrier is a block. Anything that is clogged up can be unclogged. So I feel that any of us, if we are facing a barrier, we just have to step back and ask ourselves, is there another way to look at this? Is there something here I could do differently? And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. And I think it's important to keep trying to overcome things in life. But there are also points in our life where we have to accept that certain things cannot change or certain things cannot change easily.
Hmm.
So take the example of foreign credentials. 30 years ago, it was a huge barrier. Today, there is a better recognition of foreign credentials, and there is a lot of policy changes, legislative changes here in Canada that is making it easier for foreign trained people to come and work here. But it's taken 30 years,
Hmm.
right? And so some things take time to change, and it's important we are part of that advocacy work and we continue to inform people about it, we continue to advocate for it. But during that 30-year period, it has made my life easier by accepting that my credentials are not going to be easily accepted and then work around it and try to make the best of my circumstances and not get bitter about it and try to start contributing. For me, the big question has always been, Ravi, not what Canada can do for me, but what can I do for Canada? By just flipping it around, it's just made my immigrant journey such a positive and such a memorable journey because my focus is what can I do for Canada?
That's lovely. And I'm sure if all us immigrants take that to heart and work in that manner, it can change the whole narrative. What can we expect from you in the future? What does the future hold for you? Where do we see you?
So I'm one of those people who very much live in the moment. I will confess to that. I pay a lot of attention to today rather than yesterday or tomorrow. But having said that, I think what you can expect from me in the future is a lot more of what I'm already doing. I'm hoping for a future where there is a lot of global travel, a lot of connecting with and learning from people, cultures all around the world, and being able to give back more on a global stage.
That's lovely. I hope you continue on this glorious path of yours. It's been lovely chatting with you today. I've learned a lot, and I'm hopeful that the listeners they would take some actionable bits from our conversations and apply into their life. Before I let you go today, any last final thoughts for myself or the listeners?
I definitely want to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Ravi. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge how important the work you do is. Because what you're doing is more than just sharing stories. What you're doing is recognizing that all of us have a story to tell, and everybody has a voice that is important to hear. And so you're practicing inclusion through the important work that you do. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that and congratulate you for what you've been able to accomplish so far. And the only thing I want to say, parting words, if I may, to everybody out there is take good care of yourself, take time to have happy moments in life and to look at all the things that's going well for us. Make time to give back through volunteering or to engage in working with people in communities or with organizations so that our collective efforts can make change and make this world a fairer, better, and kinder place for all.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for your kind words and a lovely message to end the show on.
Thank you, Ravi.